appreciate that. Welcome. If you are wondering if you're in the right place, if you're here to hear more about Measure B, our general obligation bond measure that we're looking at putting that will be on the ballot in November of 2024, then you're in the right place. Linda Adamson, your superintendent, and I'm here to really talk to you a little bit more about the bond, along with several other members here, which I would like to take a moment to introduce you to as well. We have our president this evening with us. If you want to introduce yourself, Brian.
Well, I am Brian Swanson, 9 years on the board and presently board president, and happy to be here.
Indeed. And also with us is our assistant superintendent.
Joshua Jarn, assistant superintendent, CBO, been with the district. This is my 3rd year.
Okay, wonderful. And you're going to hear from both of them, particularly at the beginning part of this evening. And just so you have an idea of what the makeup will be, we're going to start with just a brief presentation, which really is intended to give you sort of an overview, of what the bond entails. It was, we put that together just based on basic questions that we've been receiving from the community over the last few weeks. And so we hope that will sort of, give you sort of a general starting point. And then really after you've heard from us, then we are going to open it up to some questions to all of you that you have that opportunity to ask this evening. This is really not it is just intended as an informational evening. I want to be very clear from the beginning that I, as superintendent of Pacific Grove Unified School District and an employee of the district, I'm not here to sway you in any way. I'm really here to give you information, and to answer the questions to ensure that you can, when you do go to the polls in November of 2024, that you are going so to be able to make an informed decision, right? So that's the purpose of this evening. So I think what we'll do is we'll go into, straight into the presentation and the slides. I normally I hate standing here with a podium in front of me, but because we are recording this and it is online, I need to be able to use the microphone. So that limits me a little bit. Normally I would probably be right there, with all of you to talk just a little bit more casually, but I'll try to keep it as casual as we can. All right, so the slides, we'll go ahead and put those on the screen in just a moment so we can follow those as we go. All right, so I'm going to ask if we could just move to the second slide right there. Okay, so this first one really is, this is obviously the first question that most people would be asking. What is Measure B? What is a general obligation bond? And so, I like starting out with this in particular just to, with some of the basic facts. And so you may have read a little bit about it already, but I think the essential pieces you want to know is that we will be going out to the voters and asking for Pacific Grove voters to decide on the bond, which will be a total of $78 million. So that's the first piece that's important. And really it will be on, as I've already said, it'll be on that ballot. And this is a presidential election, as you all know. That was also, just really intentional and recommended to us that this was an important year for us to take advantage of that, because as we all know, during presidential elections, it is typical for us to get a higher percentage of voters who make their way over to the polls. And really, what we are looking at, what we want to use that funding for is essentially exactly, what the language there states. It will allow us, if this is approved, to make some critical renovations and improvements to schools and classrooms across our district. There's a high percentage of our voters who do not have children in our districts. And so what is important, what I am really trying to get across to community members is that information, understanding that this is not, this is a TK through 12, program improvement plan. When we do put together our master facilities plan, it will be with the intention of really doing renovations and improvements across all of our school sites. So that's, TK12. Very often there's a sort of an assumption made that it's only going to be for high school, as an example, but that is absolutely not the case. It is across the board. I like to really, use the word, this is an opportunity for us to re-envision many of our programs across, all of our grade spans. And ultimately, it would also qualify us if our voters do approve the bond, that it would actually allow us to qualify for state matching funds. So we have the potential of doubling that $78 million. Josh Dawn will talk a little bit more, to that concept as well a little later tonight. I'm sure there'll be a question that comes up with that. And ultimately, the people ask, well, what is the percentage that's needed in order to pass the vote, and it would require 55% of voters to vote in favor of it when it comes to voting. So that's just a little bit of sort of an introductory piece to the bond itself. What is a general obligation bond, right? And you may often, I hear it referred to as a GO bond. I think the first piece I want to be able to start with this is that I think the general misconception that most people have is that they believe that it is a tax on houses only, and that's not actually correct. It really, is it is a tax that is applied to property taxes in Pacific Grove on all properties, with the exception of schools, of churches, and any government properties as well. So really the language there goes into the specifics. Once again, it's going to give us that ability to really do some renovations, but also really do some growing and improvement and enriching of our programs across the district. And ultimately, yes, it's all taxable property, residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural, as long as it's located within the district boundaries. So just some critical facts that, we really want to be able to impress and sort of, drive home about the bond itself. I think the first piece that we've answered already, that the amount is 78 million. And again, I think the biggest question that people will have is, at this point, is how much ultimately is it going to cost me, right, as a taxpayer? I think what's important here, and again, I think this is where we've had a lot of conversations, for property owners within the district to understand, is that ultimately, yes, because of, Prop 13, you are looking at, property owners within the district are paying different rates. And so, ultimately, I think that second bullet is important because the estimated average tax rate is less than $32 per 100,000 of assessed valuation per year. When you're talking about assessed value versus taxable value, I think, just the distinction there that you really want to impress, on people is that the assessed value is your property's estimated value versus the taxable value, right, which is the percentage that's used to calculate your property taxes. I think what's important is that very often people will confuse assessed value with taxable value. And really, the assessed value is the amount that is placed on your property by Monterey County, right? So, and is very often, lower, right, than the actual taxable value. So again, just some, distinguishable, facts between the two. And then that third bullet, which is important, is, for everyone to know, is that if passed, Measure B will extend but not increase the district's current total tax rate. And there's actually a really nice little visual, and I think it's actually on the next slide, which kind of just shows a little of what that looks like in theory. So if you look at this, many of you may be aware that we, did go ahead and vote in, and we currently are still paying off Measure D. And so the funds for that you will see on this particular graph are shown in gray. And then really, if passed, Measure B, shows in blue. So essentially what you're looking at is, as we, go in and we project, in the outgoing years, all the way up through, approximately 2032, we'd be paying the property taxes would be paying the exact same rate that you're currently paying. And then really after that period of time, you'll go ahead and see a decrease as that amount is paid off in the outgoing years. So again, I think that little, yellow blurb, right, that Measure B bonds are projected to extend but not increase the total 24-25 fiscal year rate of $68.97. And ultimately, that we're looking at extending, right, what we're currently paying, not increasing the current rate. So I really, like that graph because it shows that visual. All right, so again, I think, the question comes to mind is, what, if it is passed, what would the funds be used for? So this is really just a nice visual that I think, gives a little bit of that summary. The first one for me as an educator, I think, is the one that excites me, most, because it really would allow us to, really look at expanding our current career technical educational program, so CTE. So you're looking at science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, otherwise known as our STEAM labs, for all grades. Again, that's important, all grades across all of our school sites. This really is an opportunity for us to really grow many of those programs. Just one example that comes to mind for me here, when I think about our CTE programs, we have an incredible culinary arts program at our high school that is, functioning in a very sort of adequate facility. And I think, our staff have made, do with, what's there, but this would be an opportunity for us to really be able to put together and build sort of a state of the art facility for, that program to take place. The second, really it comes down to replacing deteriorating electrical systems and wiring, and then also renovating and modernizing our existing classrooms and educational facilities. So it's a combination of the three. There is a misconception sometimes that, this can go towards, additional staffing, and absolutely not. So bond money can only be spent, on really, these three areas of focus. Again, that bullet is there that Measure B will extend but not increase the current tax rate. We really wanted to just remind everyone of that. And then the last one, I think, is important for everyone to know that the funds, if it is approved, we as a district get to determine what we're going to spend that funding on. And that's really the exciting part as well. So, we've already completed a very thorough needs assessment. And so, we have a priority list that's already been determined of, what's been identified as, immediate priorities and needs within the district. So we have that as a starter point. But if this is approved in November, we will go out and go ahead and begin the process of developing a master facility plan. And that will include input from our community. It'll include your voice. We'll be able to take that and really get, feedback, from the community on really what you would like to see, within, your own schools. So that's the exciting part of that. And ultimately, that's going to be, sort of a good, multi-month project. We're looking at, bringing that plan forward for board approval in April or May of the school year. And so again, that's, the exciting part of it. I think it's really important for everyone to know that really that will involve the collaboration and input of everyone within the community. And I even think of, Measure D currently, we hear so much feedback from our community, and very often, community members who don't even have children, right, within the districts, who, love the fact that, because of the facilities improvements we were able to do with our last bond, that, those facilities are available, to every community member who lives in PG. And that, really, when you're talking about community and, the ability to, build and allow for, more connections and building of relationships, that, is ultimately what we see. So it would really allow for that to continue. All right, I think the next one, taxpayer protection. So this really just talks about, what checks and balances are in place. So, the question would always be is, well, hold on, okay, so we say we vote yes for this, the district goes ahead and puts together this plan, but, what checks and balances are in place, right, to ensure that what we say we're going to do with the funding, we ultimately, will do. So really, I think all four of these measures, speak to that component of, number one, accountability, and then transparency on how we will spend those fundings. And so I think the first one being, that it does, because it is a bond, there are requirements that we as a district have to take, but ultimately full public disclosure of all expenditures. So really, it is something that we're going to be reporting out at regular board meetings every time we do bring forward a project and approve an expense. It's really something that our oversight committee is involved in. So they, really approve sort of the project lists, that will end up on within that plan. And then ultimately that's brought forward, for the board to have that constant oversight and, involvement in. And so, the full public disclosure, I think, is a given. Measure B funds cannot be taken by the state and spent elsewhere. And I think that's an important component too, is that once we've determined how we're going to spend that funding, the state can't come in and take it and reassign it elsewhere. And so again, that's an important piece, I think, for voters to know, that once we've determined and decided this is what we're spending it on, that's what it gets spent on. An independent citizens oversight committee, otherwise known as a COCB, must review and report on all bond expenditures. So it is the requirement of the district to really identify and put together a committee who really their sole charge is to meet regularly, meet with our district staff, and to ensure and oversee how we are putting those projects together, how we're spending the funding, and that we are indeed doing what we said we would do, right, when we put the plan together. And so that oversight committee is made up of citizens, of Pacific Grove, and they report out frequently as well at our regular board meetings, and come together as a team to, again, just oversee how those expenditures are made. And then the final one, many projects will qualify for state matching funds, right? So again, because if this is voted on and is approved, as I said already, we'd have that ability to go out to the state and request state matching funds. So the potential to double the amount for our plans. All right, this next one is really just yes, so this is the language you can expect to see, right? When you go to the polls to vote in November, this is exactly what you will see. I think the biggest question that comes from this is, well, why is it so complicated? Wouldn't we want to make it as simple as possible for everyone to be able to understand? So two things there, right? There's a requirement, number one, a certain amount of words that we actually have to have, in the language itself. And then the second part is 50% of those words are actually required by the state. So again, we only have leeway in, 50% of what's there. The other thing I know I always get is, well, hold on, if there's a certain number of words, why are we spelling out, the district? So proper nouns only count as one word, right? So that's why we're spelling out Pacific Grove Unified School District as an example. But again, I think that's, important for everyone to know that we really, don't have the full leeway on how we word that. And then, obviously the additional materials that we're able to put together, with the actual, with everyone's ballots, we use that opportunity to, provide additional explanations. But just wanted that to be known. The next slide just really gives an example of, some of the projects that you will see on the project list. Again, that this comes with the ballot material, with your ballot materials. This is just a sampling. There is a more complete and a very broad list that you will see that is included in your materials. I think what's important to note here is that just because it's on the list doesn't mean we have to do it. But if it's not on the list, we can't do it, right? So we really were very intentional about being sure and working with our consultant that we tried to make it as, broad and as exhaustive as possible. So you'll see a lot of things on there that we've talked about already. And then really just the last slide is kind of just our key takeaways, right? I think, what I would want any of you to be able to go away, with tonight, if you were to be, approached by another member, community member in Pacific Grove, and they were to ask you, well, in 30 seconds, tell me what I need to know about the bond. These are kind of the takeaways. So I think the first one being, right, due to limited state funding, passing this bond measure provides a guaranteed source of local funding to make critical renovations and improvements to our school district. I think it's not everyone understands, when with school districts, how limited we are. If you want to make any kind of a significant, improvement, the only way we can really pull that funding together is, to go to the voters. And so I think that's an important piece for everyone to know. And again, what we plan to do with those funds, right? It really is our opportunity to grow our programs. The second, full public disclosure of spending is required, right? So there is that full accountability and transparency that, we follow through checks and balances. And then I think the last one, that the funds cannot be taken by the state, right? We as a district, if this is approved, we get to decide how we're going to spend those funds in moving forward. So we have full ownership, right, of the process. So that's the presentation in a nutshell. At this time, I'd love to be able to turn it over to our president for a few additional words and pieces of information that he's going to share with you. So, President Swanson.
I'm so proud that we're doing this. It's like I think about I'm sorry, I'm turning down my hearing aids because it's like blasting in my ears. I think about my 9 years on the board and the last bond measure that we pushed through at that time, and it was 30 million, and it seemed like a lot, right? We're like, what are we going to do with 30 million? And then we just like boom, 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 because there's so much. And as we floated this out through the survey to the public and we saw such tremendous support, I'm so excited about what lies ahead for us. As you guys I'm sure you walk around our different campuses and you see there's just so much that still needs to be done. And I've told this story before, but I think about when, last year I was down at UCLA and I'm walking around their campus and it was so beautiful and every building was fantastic and the grounds were great and it just felt like such a welcoming place. And not like we don't have that, but I want us to have more of that. And I think we now have that opportunity to do that. And when you look at the needs assessment, as we roll through that, it's like there's so many things that need to be done. And for anybody that's a property owner here too, it's like I think we all know it's like the main thing that people look at when it comes to where you're going to live is like, well, what are the schools like? We have great schools, but we could amp it up a little bit more. And again, being a property owner too, it's like it's not costing us any more. We're just kind of maintaining where we are. So I'm very excited about how this has progressed. I'm thrilled that the board came together and backed it unanimously to move forward with it. And it's the possibilities that lie before us are really tremendous. And all the things that Dr. Adamson had pointed out too, it's like this is money that's going to be our money, right? It's like the state's not going to take it back. The public can come in and will be able to take a look at everything and how we spend the money too and have input on that. So I don't know. Long story short, I'm really excited about what lies ahead for us. And, I'm sure there are questions and we welcome those, but I think it's really a tremendous opportunity. So that's where I am. But anyway, all that said.
Before we get into questions, I'm just going to have like a little personal anecdote. I'm fourth generation Pacific Grove Unified School District, going all the way back to my great grandparents. I have a fifth generation kiddo at one of our schools. I did move away for a long time. I spent a lot of time in the Central Valley improving schools in Clovis, Fresno area, where their schools are absolutely beautiful. Not to say our schools are not, but when I returned here in the early 2000s and I walked a campus that I once frequented as a student, it was a little bit of an issue that I took with the fact that our schools have not been, modernized. My family owns multiple homes. I own a home in this town as well. And, when I walk our campuses, we want to be proud of the facilities that we have. It also promotes a higher level of engagement with our student population, which is crucial. And again, as a homeowner, as a parent, as an alumni of this school district, I think it's really important that this district takes this forward step to do what it needs to do and is obligated to do for the community and the community to come. So for my children's children, your children and your grandchildren, I think it's very important. And we're going to lay out a really neat plan for the district here. This is not my first time working on the general obligation bond. It is in the capacity of chief business official for a school district. But I've ran almost $1 billion worth of school bond projects in the Central Valley. I worked for the county office for 14 years, where I helped a lot of school districts in this county pass bonds. I'm on a state board, and I'm not going to promote it, but there is a proposition, Prop 2, on the ballot as well, which is the state matching funds. This district is never subscribed to. So when we talk about state matching funds, if Prop 2 passes, which is formerly SB 50, Senate Bill 50, this district can leverage 50% of its modernization eligibility to modernize our schools from the state. And I just felt like that was important. That was kind of an important thing to note, because it's not something that this district has leveraged before. It's not something we've talked about very much before, but we did file our paperwork with the state for baseline eligibility with the Office of Public School Construction. And this district has tons of what are called pupil grant baseline eligibility to modernize our schools. So why not tap into that additional resource at the state level? And with that, I will open it up for questions.
I get my own microphone. Thank you. So, I'm not on a timer, am I?
No.
Okay, good. That's different. I'm not a financial guy. I read most of the information. Measure D was 30 million. And that's gonna, the graph shows it's gonna get paid out over a period of time. But just my basic household math, and the question that most people ask me about the bond is the rate stays the same. I kind of got that. So it's like getting a mortgage for $500,000 at 4%. Rate stays the same. You get a mortgage for $1 million at 4%. Rate stays the same. Okay, this is more money. So something has to play out differently than what is in the past. You either have to pay it out over a longer period of time, which means we'll all pay more money over that longer period of time. I'm guessing that's what happens. Is that, Josh, is that pretty accurate?
That's pretty accurate, right? And the bar chart that was shown, the taper off effect of the obligation that projected cap is $70, right, per 100,000. The taper off effect is bonds are being sold, and you saw the gray area. If you want to bring that back up, Andrew. Right now, the current GO obligation is around 40 something dollars ish, right, in that neighborhood. This would push that up by $31 per 100,000 assessed valuation, which is the blue area. But what you see is in the taper off is it's projected to never go above 70, and it's projected to taper off as the other issues, the other series that we've issued, this district has issued with for Measure A and Measure D, are paid off over time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, I'm going to pay more for B than I paid for D as a homeowner. That in the lifespan of the bond, this is what's going to happen. And the other question is, do you have a bond rate yet? Do you know what you're going to be paying? And do you know what the fee is to let the bond? And will that all be wrapped into the bond itself? Is that how it's going to work?
That's how it works. Absolutely. Yeah, and our tax rate is a fixed tax rate, right? That's what we're stipulating here, that the tax rate is fixed. But you're right, extending the bond out further with a variety of additional series releases are an increased cost to the taxpayer over time. Absolutely, but our rate is fixed.
I got that.
And that's the very important part.
Yeah, I got that. And do you know what the fee is going to be, or do you have somebody who's going to work with you on the bond?
Right. So every release, there's a fee associated with a series release.
It's percentage of the bond.
It's not. It's a fixed rate. It's around $50,000.
$50,000. Okay. Thank you.
I've got a few questions on, there's a portion where the building, there's going to be expansions of classrooms and offices regarding mental health workers. And I'm concerned that the school's taking on a role in the community that is not traditional part of the education role. I'm trying to understand better, what is the projected need that you see for mental health workers for the district, and to expand our office space for these people?
Can I address the expansion of office space first? First and foremost, that is something that was listed as a potential opportunity for the district to use these funds for, because if we don't list it, we can't use it for those funds or for those purposes. But as you know, Dr. Adamson mentioned, we're going to develop a full facilities master plan with buy-in from our community stakeholders as well, multiple sessions, committee meetings, to develop a plan as to how to spend these dollars and on what projects. So yes, that is listed, but there's no guarantee that any project that's listed up there is going to come to fruition until our facilities master plan dictates as such, which is bought in by the community and approved by our board. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Adamson to talk about the mental health issues we have.
Yeah, that was well covered, Mr. John. I think as far as the mental health, needs of our community, I think that's something that is dictated by, on an annual basis. And we really look at the needs of our students in the current year to determine what that is. We, really made that decision at the end of last year for this year to ensure that we had mental health therapists and specialists and counselors at all of our school sites, because there was a need. And that is what the data was telling us. It was, what our working with our students was telling us as well. So, as a result of that, we did, yes, increase those services at all of our schools. And as a result of that, it really was about, finding office spaces for all of them at our schools. And so as far as increasing that, I think really would be at this point is what we're looking at, is being able to maintain that and ensure that they have, the facilities that they need in order to do the work that they do.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Couldn't read the slide after this about the whole list of what could be used, but there seems like a focus on like trickle work and not like modernization of air conditioning systems or any other sort of built system. Was there, or maybe I missed it. Maybe I just didn't read it quickly enough. Yeah, that's the one. But I was wondering if this list could ever be amended or added to after the bond possibly passes.
It's a great question. And I think what I want to be clear on with that list, that is not the exhaustive list. That is just a sample of some projects. There's a much more broad and exhaustive list that will be included with the ballot materials. So again, this is just, some, of them. I think that you'll see when you look at the master list that really, I think we've tried to include, every, possible project that we know that we may be considering. So again, this is really just a sample. Yeah.
Yeah, just to dovetail into that, the primary focus from, Dr. Adamson and I are new to the district in administration, but the prior focus of the prior bond, Measure D, was essentially to repair existing facilities and infrastructure. It wasn't necessarily issued or sold to the voting population to modernize or expand our schools. So what we like to call that is deferred maintenance. This is something very different beyond what Measure D explained in the ballot language, as well as how we surveyed our voters about what was the interest of the voters, what would they like to see with our school district. So this Measure B is being more promoted as, yes, additional deferred maintenance, but more along the lines of modernization and expansion of program. So we will get into the discussion on educational programming when we get into the facilities master planning process. That requires the district to do what's known as an educational specification. Also, the California Department of Education requires that we do that. That's basically another component of the roadmap for building. It's just a component that's tied to the classroom. So how does this reinforce and support and expand educational programming within our school district? And then how can the facilities tie back to that educational programming?
Thank you. I don't want to dominate here, but excuse me, $7-8 million is a lot of money. And if I'm not a contractor, but if I price out some of and you said there could be additional projects, that's a lot of projects. And there's always additional cost. As you know, things get more expensive, rates go up. But I guess my question is that, enrollment in the district is, since 2019, has gone down. Even after COVID, is still going down. Revenue's up, property taxes up, revenue's up. Costs haven't dropped significantly. And so I guess my question is, if from a financial standpoint, we're giving you $78 million, what persuasive argument would you make that with your fiduciary responsibility, you're going to be managing costs, not only new costs, but current costs? Staff and teacher salaries are, as a percent of the total operating budget, are higher than most other districts. And I asked Josh this question last year. I think it's around 88%, something like that. That's higher than other districts. So could you be a little bit more persuasive in selling the bond issue if you said, we've taken these measures to reduce our operating costs and be more efficient than what we already have? I guess that's my question.
Right. So, Measure D, Measure B, Measure A, they all flow through Fund 21. And, without trying to bore everybody on school finance, because it's I bore the board, I put them to sleep through most of my budget presentations. Looking at Fund 01, our unrestricted general fund that pays for our operational costs of the district, and then stepping aside and looking at Fund 21, where we house our bond measure money, they're completely separate pools. And I know you know that. So you're right, this district, so to the first point that you raised, actually this year, the district's enrollment had an uptick. And we actually are anticipating an uptick. It's small, but for a district of our size, 60 students, that's a pretty significant uptick. We also receive ADA on our TK and kinder population, which is also, as you mentioned, an uptick in revenue, not just property tax revenue, but an uptick in local control formula, funding formula revenue. That's helpful for the district. We're anticipating an uptick again in our TK and kinder population because of the universal pre-K expansion. So yes, that will taper off at some point. We saw the effects this year. We're going to see even more of the effects next year. we also need to prepare our schools for the facility needs of that impact, which right now this district hasn't prepared for, specifically associated with our transitional kindergarten population. And the fact that facilities have to be Title 22 compliant, Title 5 compliant under California Code of Regulations. That's something that this district needs to look at and prepare for, because if it's 60 this year and 60 next year and maybe 60 in the out year, we're back at just over 2,000 ADA, which is where the district was some time ago. I mean, we're getting close. Okay. So, I mean, we're at 1774 this year. Right. So, you know, we're nearing that 2,000 again, hopefully. We also are hoping to expand and build out educational programming. It's a draw, right? Our school district, the draw for this school district, number one, is the teachers. We have phenomenal educators in this district and our classified staff that support our teachers in the educational setting. That's the draw, right? That's the draw to this community. That's the draw to our schools. Back to the operational offsetting situation that we're dealing with, which is, yes, an uptick, minor uptick in revenue, and expenditures are on the rise, to the point where, you know, this district has some minor deficit spending that it's going to have to address. Unfortunately, we can't address that with Fund 21 bond measure dollars. But what we can do is continue to attract the brightest and best teachers to our district and potentially grow and expand program to bring more students in. I don't know if that answered your question, but okay.
Thank you. Can you go to the bar chart again? Oh, so what I see there is it's the rate now is $68.97. And if I understand what you said, that'll never go above $70.
It's projected not to go above $70. That's correct.
Okay, can you explain the word projected, or it won't go against?
It's projected not to go above $70.
It can go above $70 then.
So right now, we use a very conservative tax rate, extremely conservative. So with a conservative tax rate, it's projected not to go above $70 per 100,000.
Okay, because the last time we had a bond, I saw the average number, and then I saw what ended up on my tax bill, and they were two grossly different numbers. So that's why I'm asking that question.
Well, and the average, you're right. I mean, we are going to see numbers above, but also numbers below that. And I think because of that, because we have varying, with Prop 13, right? We have varying, property values, right? And so I think as a result of that, it will be different. I mean, all we can do at this point is put out an average out there, but with that anticipation that yes, it could be very well above or below, depending on what your, assessed value is of your current property. Is that accurate? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so at the projected $70 amount, what is the total cost of this measure be then over the number of years that you have it out there? Instead of okay, so it's $74 million. What is it going to be? 140, 200?
So that's actually a hard question to answer because it depends on when we release a series, right? So if it were 10 years, the number would be gravely different than if it was 20 years, it would cost a lot more, right? So if the district is aggressive in the facilities master planning program rollout, the costs are going to be much less. So for me to quantify 7, 10, 15, 20 years, I just can't stand here and do that. But what I can say is the district is going to be aggressive in rolling out those projects. As Mr. Gibbs mentioned just a minute ago, every year cost escalation it's 2 digits. It's north of 10%. We had a 21% year. That's kind of what occurred with Measure D, which was sold in 2020. By the time we started initiating projects in this district, the cost escalation was very high. So I can't tell you over the course of this measure how much it's going to cost in total because I don't know how aggressive. I mean, we're going to attempt to be aggressive, right? It would be nice to use all $78 million in under 10 years and cap that expense. It just depends on the amount of the program that's built. So a $78 million program is very different, drastically different than a $156 million program if the district receives the 50% match on state funds. Also, if the district is aggressive in the first $25 million worth of bond sales and we receive $25 million from the state, that's less of an obligation the taxpayers have. So we're trying to authorize up to $78 million. But if Prop 2 passes, which we'll see if it passes or if it doesn't, that also is something that helps our tax base as well.
So what is the plan in the future so we don't get through this massive deferred maintenance project?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a great question. And over the course of the last 2 years, this district has spent around $14 million in deferred maintenance. And primarily it's been focused on building envelopes, primarily. Some mechanical systems, some accessible passive travel, parking lots, things like this, that the longer we wait, the more expensive they get. That was Measure D. And we still also have 2 series to release in Measure D. One will be brought to the board in October. Another one, more likely than not, will be released next year. That's an aggressive release of a general obligation bond. In the last 3 years, we've released 3 series to get us up to what I like to call like a baseline of our schools. And then Measure B, if it's passed, it actually kicks in and helps us finish out some of the other deferred maintenance items and begin looking at educational program expansion. And I think that's why this is so important for this district. We don't have outdoor learning. This is a wonderful environment we all live in, but we don't have any outdoor learning spaces for our students, really. We just don't. We need to expand that for our student population. Dr. Adamson mentioned culinary. I mean, our culinary program is like one of the best in the state of California. They win every single award that there is out there, and they're operating in a very tight space that needs modernization. They need expansion. So that's something we're looking at too. So again, it comes down to how aggressive are we in our planning? I think this district's going to be very aggressive once we get through the facilities master planning process. And we have a facilities master plan, which is a roadmap for us to follow. And we follow it as we planned. And we have checks and balances along the way that the board approves and the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee also approves. So I anticipate we're going to move really quickly through this.
I've got just a quick question on the security scope that's outlined. In light of the incident that happened at the high school this week, I don't really know what the nature of the crimes are always. It's always very vague what the police report says about the individual. All the security, the scope that's been outlined, and it seems pretty granular, so it seems like you have an idea of what you want to do. Does that address the types of trespassing that's been done? And I'm particularly interested in understanding what is being asked when we say safety barriers, point of entry access. What is it that you have in mind to keep the kids safe?
I think, what you're referring to is a little bit of the report that we provided back in, I think it was maybe June. We had an entire audit of our safety practices and protocols done last year by a company called McKimball and Associates. And they came out, and it was a very, thorough report that they were able to provide. They spent a lot of time here on our campuses, actually, spending time looking at our practice, watching and observing how we do various drills, looking at all of the perimeters and doing sort of a threat assessment, on all of our school sites. And as a result of that, we received a very thorough report. And so, what you're referring and referencing is a report out that we provided. In addition to that, we didn't just make those decisions ourselves in isolation. We created a safety committee at the end of last year. And so really that was made up of representatives at each of our school sites who really gave, we did a thorough report. In fact, it was Josh who presented that to them. But we presented the report and then really asked for their input on, what we want to identify as our sort of, 3 or 4 top priorities that we would begin with. And so, I'm going to turn it over to Josh to talk a little bit more about the specifics on what that means when we're looking at, entries and, what steps we took to secure, each of our campuses. But a lot of that work has been done, which, we're very proud of. I think, the piece that I just want to add, say before I turn it over to Josh is really along the lines of that, any school site, any district, right, regardless of how secure you're able to make that campus, I think there's never going to be a degree where we can say that everything it's completely 100%. And so, we train for possible events and situations that we anticipate. And as a result of that, we're prepared and ready as we were yesterday. But, we're still going to expect that there are going to be times that, we have to, put into practice and put into motion some of the practices that we have. But again, I think I'm going off topic with that. I'm going to ask Josh to speak to a little bit more of the specifics on, what we have implemented.
Right, so the safety committee made recommendations to our board to initiate top 3 concerns to be addressed this fiscal year. The safety committee is meeting on October 3rd. We're going to look at the top 3 concerns that have been put into motion this year, and I'll explain those in just a second. And then we're going to evaluate what we need to do throughout this year into the next year. The Kimball report was a very comprehensive look at our school facilities, at our school infrastructure, and there were many more recommendations outside of just the top 3, but we felt like the top 3, the committee felt like the top 3, which was presented to the board, were the 3 immediate things that we could work on as a district. The first one was a visitor management system. When you walk onto our school campuses, well, when you used to walk onto our school campuses, you might see something like this. You might see an Apple badge, you might see a button, you might see another badge. There was no standard visitor management system at any one of our school sites. There was no badging system. It was basically you sign a ledger and you walk in, you show your ID. I mean, yes, this is, we felt like we've been very safe. This is a safe community, but that's not really a good practice to get into. So we implemented the visitor management system, which is at every single school site right now, where we have, aside from district staff who wears a badge like this, any visitor that comes into our school campuses wears a badge. It has their photo on it. They've scanned their ID. They don't have to do it again when they show up because they're in our system. And by our system, I mean our localized system. If you're a volunteer or a parent, you've been fingerprinted at the district office. That's the system that it's tied into. So we know when somebody comes on campus as a visitor that they've been fingerprinted and they're allowed to be on campus. If they have not been, we have systems in place for that as well. Per ed code, you have to be escorted on campus by a certificated staff member. That's very tough for some of our staff members to be with a volunteer all day long if they have not been fingerprinted, but that's an ed code requirement. So we do have systems in place to allow folks on campus that may not have been fingerprinted, but they have to be with a certificated staff member the entire time they're on campus. So that was the very first thing we did, the visitor management system. The second component was training. That was something we felt like we could roll out relatively quickly. We learned a lot from the Kimball Comprehensive Needs Assessment. And we rolled out, an exhaustive list of training for our district this year. Everything from incident command systems, ICS 100 through 300 for our staff, ICS 400 through 800 for our administrators. And that's basically, how do we develop an incident command system and structure in the event of an emergency? Who is the incident commander? What is their responsibility? How do they communicate? What is their radio etiquette? All of that, right? We also rolled out the We Got Your Back training, which is now scheduled. It hasn't been completed. And what that is, that is a curriculum that is weaved into our everyday curriculum, grade specific for students as to how to respond in the event of an emergency. They've been doing Big 5 drills for a very long time. We do not practice, at the elementary level, we do not practice like live barricading and lockdown. But the curricular component that we're weaving in now is something that it's going to be better for the teachers to teach the students than it is to have a security company and then teach the teachers and teach the students. This is something that our teachers will be teaching our students, and it's grade specific. K through 3, 4th and 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in high school. It's all grade specific training, and that's the We Got Your Back program. The third item that the safety committee brought forward to the board was standardization of communication. And I think that, unfortunately, we did have somebody walk on our campus the other day. It was resolved within, I'd say, under 3 minutes. I was there. I was involved in the entire situation. But how we communicate, not only to our families, but how do we communicate to our staff on campus? How do we communicate back to the etiquette over the radios? How do we communicate to our students? And that's something that we did kind of in a 3-part when the incident occurred. We communicated to our teachers to let them know exactly what occurred, followed by a communication to our students to let them know what occurred, which no one knew what had occurred because it occurred when they were in session in their classrooms. And then finally to our community. So those were the 24, 25 areas of focus for us this year. But there's other ancillary projects that are taking place. So I will just mention one. This district's been working through over the past 3 years, camera replacement and expansion of coverage. That's all under Measure A. That's the tech bond. Okay. So Measure A tech bond is, we're revitalizing our camera systems and expanding coverage. So new cameras, we call it head-end equipment, back-end equipment, new NVRs, which record footage. The new system that we actually just went out to bid for, I think it was a week ago. Lewis put it out to bid, will include additional cameras, more coverage, because we're phasing this in. We can't do it all at once. Number one, it's a large project to roll out. Number two, we have to have the district staff available to manage these projects. And we only have one director of technology, and he has a lot more going on than just managing a camera rollout project. But the component of the camera systems that we're installing now on the back end, the NVR side, the recorder side, is video analytics. So we can set up geofencing around our campuses that give us notification if somebody walks by a geofence, walks through a geofence. If they've walked through a geofence very quickly, you can identify if there's something in their hand. There's a lot associated with that, and that actually just went out to bid. So that's a project we're rolling out this year. But we want to expand that, right? So Measure A can only bring us so far. This wasn't included in Measure D, but we did want to reference it in Measure B's proposal because we think that's something that's very valuable to our district moving forward to secure our campuses.
Thank you. My name is Carol Marcourt. I've been a taxpayer for 30 some years, and my daughter went through the Unified School District. I have read in the newspaper that there's something called Title IX, and evidently there's an injunction on it. But I was wondering what it does. It expands sexual harassment. And I remember I read the Carmel Pinecone and how many superintendents they've lost and how many teachers have resigned over sexual harassment. Amazing. I don't know anything about it. But I think this Title IX expands sexual harassment to anybody who is LGBTQ plus or a transgender. And so does Measure D cover that? And you're covering mental health. I'm concerned about where money is going that is, and I know you have no choice over this, but is money going for this kind of legal coverage for sexual harassment? Thank you.
I appreciate the question. And if you've got that, I'm sure others do as well. And so I think I'll go back to what I'd said at the beginning was, we're very clear on what this funding can be spent on. And it really is very specific to only program improvement and enrichments, and then renovations and maintenance, right, of our building facilities. Even when we talk about mental health, it was very specific to our ability to be able to, really expand and provide facilities, offices and office spaces, for our mental health specialists in order to conduct the work that they do. So beyond that and everything else that you've mentioned, anything related to Title IX or any rules and regulations or supports we have to provide for our students, no, none of that can be included and specifically spent on and used by the bond money were it to be approved.
Now we're near the end, and thank you all for being here. You have a lot of evening meetings and whatnot. I would like to have seen more people here. Maybe you have some people online. I just have a comment and a last question. So I don't see, is anybody here from the Bond Oversight Committee in the room here tonight?
I don't believe so,
Yeah.
Mr. John. Yeah, no. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have been good if somebody was here, Joe Emilio or somebody attached to that. I was here, as you know, for the presentation, and it was unacceptable. All right, there was no presentation, there were no questions. People sort of thought it was a good idea not to ask questions. And right before a bond issue, I'm not sure that's the mindset that you or anybody else wanted to set in people's heads before you go into arguing for a bond. No oversight, no discussion, no questions. And it was almost funny. A couple of people even laughed, thanking Joe that they were saying it's good that there are no questions. And I thought that was bad. So I'd like to see more participation from the community and people who are really interested in the bond oversight situation, particularly with a lot more money on the line. My last question is 55%. What do you do if it doesn't pass?
Well, that's a question we have to consider, right? And, you put it out there, Dr. Gibbs, thank you. Right. But I mean, what do we do? I mean, then the reality is there is a chance, right? It doesn't. And then it is about our having to go back to look at what other options, that can we look at? I mean, one option would be that absolutely, in 2 years' time, do we go ahead and, try again, right? And, learn what we can from this process. But I'll stand here before you to say I'm very confident, and again, based on conversation we've had and information we have, that yes, it will. Our part of our role with this is to ensure that everyone is making informed decisions and understands what a yes vote means, right, on that ballot. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's a general answer in the sense that if it doesn't, we need to look at alternatives and other options to cover the expenses that we have. Not at this time, no. I mean, really, it's 2 months away, and we've got to, focus all of our efforts into this at this time. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think we all would have preferred to, see more people here tonight. I think, I want to remind everyone we are actually doing this at all of our PTA meetings currently. So we are, actually going out to all of our school sites to really be able to speak to our, parent representatives. And we've actually had, additional, parents join for those meetings to be there and learn more. So I do feel, we're getting a lot of that information out in that way. We're, really going in the next 2 weeks to visit with our Chamber of Commerce, our Rotary Club. And so again, just really trying to work with our current partnerships, within the community to ensure we're getting as much of that information out as we can. And so, I think it's not just, all falling on tonight, but I agree. I think with everything, we hope to have more. And then just to speak to the presentation at our last meeting where, we had our oversight committee there. That was unfortunate that was the perception that they came away with that. I can't remember exactly what it was that we were reporting out on. But again, I think that feedback from you is important for us to know that absolutely. And, we've got to be mindful of that fact that anytime we're out there in front of the public and we're sharing information, that level of responsibility and giving it the seriousness that it requires and deserves, right, is important. So I appreciate you mentioning it and pointing that out. I know we're almost out of time, but because we do have 2 people online, was there anyone online who had a question? Okay, very good. Anything?
Yeah.
Please, yes, go ahead.
I just add one thing, and I'm glad you brought it up, Mike, too. It's like, I think back over the last decade, the different bonds that have gone through. I've never seen this level of outreach before. And it's a bummer that it's like this room's not full. I wish it was. But when I think back over the years too, that we didn't even have that kind of level of outreach. And so I'm glad that we're doing this. I've been at a couple of other meetings too, and it's nice to see at least some people in the room that are asking questions and taking a look and trying to figure it out, because it can be very confusing. And it's like, well, how does this impact me and my property tax bill? But I'm glad that we're doing this because we haven't really done it before. And so it's like, at least there's an effort that's being made. Yeah. And I wish the room was full too. I wish the room was full at all of those. I wish the board meetings were just packed full of people too. They're just not, and maybe that's because everybody's happy. I don't know, or so happy, but I'm glad at least that everybody here came out tonight and that you're interested and we had great questions tonight. So I'm grateful for that. So anyway, that's my final thought. Thank you.
And on that note, it was just suggested as an idea with our butterfly parade and the butterfly bazaar coming up, that possibly we have a little booth that's there that we could have information as well out there. So we're looking into that as another, because I know this will be my first butterfly parade. I cannot wait. I've heard wonderful things. And so, I know it's going to be well attended. So I think that might be another nice opportunity for us. Yeah. Well, I'll just reiterate what President Swanson said already. Just thank you for coming this evening. We're so grateful for your questions, your interest, your dedication that you've shown. All that I ask is that you'll all leave tonight and, take that opportunity as you're out and about in the community to, share and answer questions that maybe come up, and, keeping in mind those, top 3 takeaways, right, that we work. But you all brought great questions for us this evening, and it helps us, right, in doing, just a better job in our outreach and, what additional information we want to be able to share with others. So we appreciate that. Thank you all. Right. Have a lovely evening and a great week ahead. And we'll see you at the Butterfly Parade. Thanks, everyone.